Hi there. I've been teaching anatomy and yoga for long enough now and doing a fair bit of body work to understand that there's so many things about the body that many of us would benefit from knowing more about. And so I wanted to walk us through a very simple, gentle yoga practice from a different lens. It's less about getting deeper into the body so much as it is about understanding more about the body. And so I'm going to share with you what is ostensibly a yoga practice, but it's going to talk about how the body works, why it works, and explore different postures as a means of leveraging you into understanding more about your body. It's absolutely my vision and dream that this is helpful to you and that somehow it alters, even subtly, the fabric of your life and helps you be more of service, whether that be for yourself or for others, because it's difficult to be of service if you're not fit for service. And I think for me personally, as I grow into this life and into this body, I really understand more and more that I have to have an internal awareness of wellness. And that means a sense of abundance, which means getting enough sleep, eating the right things, socializing, a host of things that ultimately add up to the whole. So let's get into it. You can see that I'm just standing here on 2 feet. My hands are just hanging by my side. What you don't see is that you have 2 skeletons. One is called the axial skeleton, and that's the core of your body. From the tailbone all the way up to the crown of your head, it's considered the axial skeleton. And a very easy way to think about that is that's just the central axis of the body. The arms and the legs, if you can imagine or conjure the image of me wearing a jacket, it's the same as my arms. They're wearing my central spine. And this is called appendicular. The appendicular skeleton literally means to hang off of. And so this arm is just like a jacket on a hanger. And the collarbone here is the only bone on the arm that is actually attached to my central axis of my body, which is kind of cool. Because what that means is that we can use the arms and the legs to put tension or stretch upon this central axis. Because remember, your brain is pretty much housed inside this bony part of your skull. Your neck is freestanding here. There's a lot of tissue, veins, arteries, and nerves that travel down and through the side. It's, we've all woken up with neck or shoulder pain, right? Most people come in and they say, oh, it hurts here. Well, here is often just a symptom, and I'm going to discuss why that is. But with the rib cage, the heart and the lungs are very protected. But we have here in the abdomen where most of our digestion happens, and actually in the small intestine, which is this small central part of the abdomen, 90% of the nutrients you eat are absorbed there. So the relationship here to this whole being is quite profound. And we're learning that more and more as maybe you've heard the term microbiome. That's about the gut flora and fauna, which is, these micro, really they're forms of biological matter. They're other life forms that are working with us to make the most out of everything that we eat. And interestingly enough, the brain up here sends a signal down to the gut via something called the vagus nerve, which governs a lot of our autonomic nervous system. These are a lot of big words, but let me make it simple for you. The brain, for a long time, was thought to govern the whole what we now know is that the gut sends 3 times as many signals back up to the brain. So what you're eating matters. How you're digesting, how you're investing in taking care of this part of yourself. And that can mean a number of different things. There's no dogma. If it works for you, then it works for you. But understanding that the relationship between the brain and the gut is key, and making sure that we can extract the right signal from the noise. Let's say, in this case, what am I eating? What's actually nutritious? What's helping me move everything through? And what's just getting hung up in there? It's a dance. And then below the abdomen, we have this pelvic bowl. You can almost think of this as like the center of the wheel of your car. This is the hub of your body. The pelvis is this connective center because you have to remember, everything that you and I do in the world is in relationship to gravity. And so gravity is descending down through my spine, and my body's figuring out a way to neutralize the influence of that gravity and stand upright. At the same time, every time I take a step, the force of contact with the earth is creating a particular ascending vibe, right? And so somewhere those things have to meet, they tend to be here in the pelvis. So you can almost think of the pelvis as a bowl of water. And if this bowl of water tipped a little out the front, well, that would lengthen the front body. What that means is that the back body has to kind of compress to give us that length. Vice versa, if I tip a little water out the back, I've shortened the front body, but that length is now in the back. I'm going to show you this from the side with something else. So when I stand here, all 10 toes on the ground, I'm evenly distributing my weight across the feet. A lot of people I see come in, and when I ask them to lift all 10 toes off the ground, what happens is their whole body drops back into place. A lot of us are like birds on a wire. We're clutching at the earth, and what that does is it creates a low-level stress that we live in all the time, and that accumulates. It adds up. So when I lift my toes off the ground, what I'm doing is I'm grounding through the 4 corners of my feet. 60% of my weight is always going through my heels. Another 30% is going through the outer ball of my foot. It's only 10% that goes down through the big toe mound. In this place, despite the fact that my toes are off the ground, my whole body can relax muscularly. What that means is that the skeleton is bearing most of the weight. From the ankle all the way through the ear hole, there's a central line. It's just like if you were hanging a weight off a string, that central line would drop right down through my ear hole, down to my ankle bone, and that would create a neutral spine. Now, the trick is, can I return my toes to the earth and still maintain this? Because again, if I have that bowl of water and I pour some out the front, you can see what happens to my low back. I'm dumping into it. That compression is all there. Vice versa, if I pour some water out the back, my spine is neutral. Now, how I'm standing here in just standing on my feet, in yoga we call this Tadasana. Whatever I'm expressing in this way tends to play out in my life. So for example, if I'm standing here, all of my weight on one leg, I'm teaching the hub of my body that this side is more important than this side. And what that means over time, again, the accumulation of this generates kind of weakness in the muscles in and around this side of the pelvis, and a more stable, structurally supported side. But then when I go to walk, well, there's almost like a asymmetrical jolt from side to side. So how do we play with this? That 10 toes trick is a great way. When you're brushing your teeth, when you're standing on an escalator, or even when you're just cooking, or doing the dishes, 10 toes off the ground. See if you can drop back into that central axis, a little bend in your knees. I can't really show you, but some of us are so mobile that what happens is we lock our knees and they almost go opposite direction. And in that place where we're relying upon the ligaments, which hold bone to bone, to kind of hold ourselves up. But when people lock their knees out, you can kind of see it in my low back. It creates a bit of a dumping effect. A little bend here, and my pelvis has to adapt. So keeping a little bend in your knees, that softness helps to generate greater relationship to gravity, because we're always in relationship to gravity. So how can you and I develop a healthy relationship to gravity? So we talked about how 60% of the weight of my body goes down through the heel, and another 30% is through the outer mound of the foot. 10% is only through the ball of the foot. And if you look at the foot from the top, you can kind of, when I flare out my toes as if I were putting on high heels or something, I can see that there's almost a division down the middle of the line. And it's almost like I have 2 feet. And it's true that I do. In fact, you can sort of see them as stacked upon one another. That outer side of the foot is more the structural foot, and that helps carry the weight of the body. The inside is more sensorial. That helps get a sense of where things are in place. If I was in a dark room and feeling around, I wouldn't be doing that with my heel. I'd be doing that with the ball of my foot. And so this relationship kind of pivots all the way up the body, because a couple of things have to happen for us in our relationship to gravity. They're inalienable rights. We have to maintain our eyes to the horizon. This is a byproduct of evolution, and our hunter-gatherer ancestors needed to be able to see where the horizon was. They needed to source water and food, but also to be aware of where predators were so that they ultimately could survive. Second reason is that the heart needs to be independent of gravity. So the heart needs to be able to pump something like 250,000 times a day. And that is what the body is doing in relationship to gravity. So when we do this, what happens is you can kind of see the weight is borne by my right leg, and the left leg is bent. And so when I do this, I'm kind of simulating walking. But if I do it from this side, then you can sort of see how the low back also has to adjust, and my head has to adjust, how my shoulders and my hips are in relationship. It's almost like this. If this were my hip and this were my shoulders, if one shoulder goes forward, then you can see that the hip is being pulled forward and up, and vice versa. So what often happens is I gain extra weight, or I sit at a desk for a long time, my front body shortens. That length has to come from the back body. But somebody comes in and they're like, it really hurts here, can you work on that? Often what the adjustment that's needed is to open up and create more space in the front body. Keep that in mind, because the whole body is this collection of joints. And a joint is kind of like a hinge is a great example of a joint, and there are different types of joints. But a hinge joint is this pivot point, right, between the sensory of the body and the structure of the body. And it's constantly having to Jacob's ladder its way up the spine. That's what the spine does. It finds a way to create this ease for the heart and for the eyes to find the horizon. So we don't think about the joints a lot in practice, but they're a wonderful thing to warm up for practicing. Most people will, in order to warm up in their practice, they will get straight into yoga. But finding a way to create some looseness in the joints, well, that's going to have positive influence for our body in the long run. Sun salutations are a great way people warm up, but it can be nice to get into those little spaces prior to just to warm up the joints and make sure that there's enough fluid moving. The motion helps create like an ease in their relationship. Because a healthy joint means that it can come together and it can move apart. So with that hinge between sensory and structural, we're constantly at play. Okay, one of my favorite ways to warm up is something that one of my teachers, Connie Darling, taught. It's called Boa Breath, and it's very simple. The idea is that it's almost like a cascade of water. You fall forward, a little bend in your knees, and as you inhale, rise up. When the shoulders start to roll back is when the hands come up and they clear the eyes. It's almost as if a bird were taking the wind, and you hug that into the central line of the heart and send it down just to the knees. From here, up the midline with your index fingers through the crown and up. Exhale and fold forward. Again, rise up. See if you can get in with the breath between each vertebrae. Sweep the arms wide, open the heart, draw the shoulder blades together, palms together, like you were forming a ball, and bounce it into the earth. Let that rebound up the spine. You can lift the pelvic floor if that is part of your practice. And again, just like water falling, flow forward. It's a very sensual movement because you're getting into those spaces between each vertebrae. You want to create a fluidity in the joints. And so moving deliberately with the breath like this is a wonderful way to warm up. Excellent. So I'm just going to juxtapose myself here a bit and turn and come forward into a high plank. I'm going to keep my arms straight, and I'm just going to pulse my chest down into the heart. Think of this like you were plugging your charger into the wall. The arms stay straight, and it's the heart just dropping into the arms. You're actually plugging the arms back into the shoulder socket. From here, I'm going to walk the hands back. Drop my sit bones low, and bring the arms in line with my ears. Chair pose. Here's a great way for thinking about the two different skeletons. You've got the arms and the legs. The legs are stabilizing the pelvis because of the alignment of my knees and my big toes with the second toe. My hips are neutral. Now, if I wanted to use my arms with the breath to create a little bit more space in my spine, interlacing my fingers, charging the arms up in line with my ears, this grip is helping me to hold my arms in place, and as I use the outside of my arms to draw away from the midline, I'm creating a little bit more space in between my shoulder blades and down the back. From here, you can drop the seat low. Try and keep the natural curve in the low back. Exhale and release. Fold. Again, we'll walk the hands forward. Plug the arms. I try to do about a standard 6 or whatever feels good. I'll bring my knees to the ground and just press back to child's pose. This is a really nice practice for creating space and length through the spine. You can hang out here. There are variations by walking the hands off to the side and creating length through one side of the waist. I tend to, whichever side's getting stretched, root down through the ground and bring the other hand on top of it. And then back to center, through to the other side. Again, we're using the arm to create stretch through the core of the body. Because of the fixed position of the low body, there's stability there. Now, cat-cow is a wonderful way to express this. As we inhale, we're creating a filling of the lungs. When I inhale, what happens is actually my diaphragm descending. I exhale and the diaphragm rises. So my lungs are filling. It often feels like a chest breath, but what's actually happening is I inhale, and my diaphragm is pushing down on the abdomen. So what this does is it helps to stabilize the low back. There's, in between each vertebrae, there's a little jelly donut. And this jelly donut, as we age, loses water. It's mostly made of water. There's different types of cartilage in there as well, and hyaluronic acid, which you don't need to know about. All you need to understand is that when I go into flexion, the jelly donut kind of pushes to the back of the body. And when I go into back extension, the jelly donut pushes to the front of the body. So when I'm in cat-cow, if I can inhale and tip my sit bones up while I look up, my inhale is helping to stabilize my low back. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. This is the safest way of going about this. I really like the version where you externally rotate your arms, because again, that clavicle, the collarbone, is the only bone attaching the arms to the body. So what I've done here is I've taken my chest muscles and opened them up. So now there's a lot more space for the heart to create length and gap the appendicular skeleton, the arms in this case, off of the axial skeleton. So now I breathe. Because everything is connected, this space that I'm creating in the shoulders is affecting the hips. And back to neutral. From here, I'm going to keep my right hand rooted and float my left arm up. This destabilizes the whole body. To balance it, I'm going to create a little bit of length through the other leg. Now, there's an illusion of symmetry that we're all chasing. This idea that the body is designed to be symmetrical. But it's less about that for me and more about, can your internal compass match what's happening externally? So if my arms are like this, then I'm just being dramatic, but we need to be aware that but I think that I'm like this. Those two compasses are kind of pointing at different directions. And we want to be able to have that central, like a neutral North Star. So one way to use the arms and the legs here is by internally rotating. Particularly the leg, what I'm doing by internally rotating the leg, I'm gapping where the low back and the spine meet, creating a nice stretch and a little bit more space for the arm. At the same time, how I'm rooting down through the index knuckle creates that stability up through my arm into the shoulder so that I can hang out here for quite some time. Come back to neutral, and we'll bring the arm out to the side and thread it through and under. Try and keep the hips neutral, the back hand onto the ground. You can come up onto the fingertips, and again, find the breath. We're using the arm to create this lengthening position in the core of the body. Breath is in the diaphragm, low in the belly. If you'd like, you can go deeper by straightening the top arm. And again, even walking out the low leg. These are all just different variations on the theme, but we're looking for a neutrality, some place to find a place for the breath to play. So let's try that on the other side, because it's bound to be true that each side is separate and different. Again, pay attention to the low body. We want to stay and remain connected to the earth. Index knuckle rooted. Similar to that big toe mound, that's where our sensory is. So the more we can engage that, the more the structural part of the hand is going to function. Internally rotate the back leg. You can externally rotate the hand, which is going to give you a similar sort of mechanism. Come back to center, sweep the arm wide and thread it through. Come up onto the fingertips, hips neutral, and straighten the arm. You can take your leg out if that's your variation. Again, work the breath. We shouldn't be sacrificing the quality of the pose for something visually impressive. We should be able to breathe adequately here. The diaphragm is really the mediator of our play and investment in the body. So we'll come back to neutral and keeping the toes tucked. In fact, we'll reach back and tuck the pinky toes and sit back on the heels. We don't talk about it, but the body is like a continuum. So from the arches of the feet, there's continuous structures with sort of switching stations in between that stretch all the way up to the eyebrows. And so this back line of the body, the continuum of it, can really have influence. For example, if somebody had plantar fasciitis and the arches of their feet were getting tight, they may also come to develop headaches. Often, if somebody comes in with headaches, the last place you're going to look at is their feet, but the foot and the ankle is really the prime place that we engage with gravity. If even the slightest part of our foot is off, we're going to feel those effects all the way up the body. And so using posture like this can really, especially for people who wear high heels a lot, who are constantly walking at work, this stretch, or even just rolling the arch of the foot across a tennis ball, if this is too intense, and let's get honest, this is pretty intense, we can create a really nice relaxation there that can have influence all the way up the body. So I just want to create and practice creating more leverage on this central axis of my body by using my arms and legs. So I've created a nice tone here in my low body. Eagle arms. One of the things I love the most about eagle arms is that the lymphatic system, which is a helper and really the medium that our immune system operates in, it doesn't have its own circulation. So when we create a pose like this, what we're doing is we're almost damming up the fluids of the body. And so with that dam, I'm creating a bit of a backstop. That water collects, the pulse of the heart is still reaching out to places, but it's being impeded now, which is creating that sort of potential for surge. And when I release, especially if I use gravity, now all of a sudden I'm engaging the musculature and the lymphatic system can piggyback off of it. The other side. Try and engage the palms into one another and feel that the elbows are pressing, the backs of the elbows are pressing into one another. That's going through the shoulders in this complex internal, external rotation dance, which again, we're looking for that surge. So just practice building up your tolerance and creating just a little bit of flush, bringing the arms overhead and creating some clench, release. That's engaging the muscles of the whole arm to invigorate. Untuck the toes. If you'd like, you can roll back over the shins and just create a nice little stretch through the front body. There's so many places to go here, but I really hope that you can catch some of these simple principles, because one way to think of the body is a collection of rivers and streams and lakes, and all of these are a continuum. So when we're looking to influence the waters of the body, and for many of us, we're about 70% water, how do we work with that? How, if the heart is constantly pumping against gravity, can we flip that and make it a little bit safer or easier for the heart to get a rest? Inversions are a great example of that. Here we could go into headstand or shoulder stand. Viparita Krani Mudra is an excellent variation with less pressure in and around the neck. I don't recommend shoulder stand unless you do have a lot of props to make it safe, because again, the low back and the neck are very adaptable, and so they're not designed to carry a lot of the weight of the body. The pelvis and the thorax and the head they're fixed systems. They have bony cages, but the neck and the low back are very free in space, and what happens then is that we adapt a lot in that place, and that can create challenges for the body. So here I'm just going to rest on my back. And it's not a crazy practice. I just want to again share some principles. With a strap, I'm just going to bring the ball of my foot into the space. My left knee can stay bent if that's more supportive of your low back, or if you'd like, you can straighten the leg, as you prefer. So this is what the leg passively is like. But if I engage my foot, this is called muscle recruiting. Now, my brain is reading that my foot is activating, and as it does that over time, it's starting to say, oh wow, this is going on longer than we thought. We should send some support. And so other muscles start to fire up. And now my quads are engaged, and my whole body is like, okay, let's be here for this. Muscle recruiting is a wonderful way to engage the whole of the body. It's a very different thing were I to do this passively than actively. And a great example would be how your hands are in chair pose. If your hands are very passive, you're going to feel that through your shoulders and into your low back. If your hands are active, you're going to feel that engagement throughout the whole of your body. And that's going to go down to your nervous system level even. So from here, just to think about using the lower body to leverage against the core, we can play with internal rotation, using the hip to move to the side of the mat is going to stretch something known as the deep six. These are muscles. They help us to walk upright, and they're part of that sway when we move. But they're also, they get tight, and the most prominent one of that is piriformis. Piriformis being the pear-shaped muscle that often pinches the sciatic nerve when somebody's dealing with sciatic pain. So you can externally rotate that as well and create a little bit of opening up here in the core of the pelvis on the front side. So really the sky's the limit. Your imagination is the limit. What is it that you're trying to do? What is it that you're hoping to accomplish? What is your intent? And how can you generate that play? Because even though we're adulting, doesn't mean that we can be without play. We need it. We need to be curious and explore. And, you know, this is such a great example because as I engage the quads, has my leg becomes straighter, as my thigh bone plugs back into my pelvis, and my pelvis is stabilized by the floor, I have a sense of stability, which is a good place to play from. Okay, now when I internally rotate the leg, what happens? Is that tighter, or is it when I externally rotate? How are the hamstrings on the back of the leg playing with this? Are they appreciating it, or do I need to back off? Where is that sweet in between place that is nourishing as well as challenging? And that is the dance. That is this yogic practice. Because yoga asana, this physical practice, is really just about leveraging us deeper into our being, our ability to sit, our presence in what is happening right now. So, straps are helpful. There's lots of ways to use them. There's, if you're interested in that, Iyengar yoga is a wonderful place. But I was talking about inversions, and a very simple, in fact, the most accessible one is a little bridge. And because 60% of the water of my body is stored in the legs, if I can bring my legs above my heart is receiving that benefit. And interesting to note, when I come up like this, remember we talked about the heel carrying most of the weight and the outer ball of the foot. Well, it's the same thing. I have 60% of my weight in the heel, 30% is in the outer ball of my foot, and only 10% is through the big toe mound. So up here, my shoulders are away from my ears, my elbows are into the ground, and I can stay here for quite some time. Having a block nearby, you can use different angles of the block to help stabilize your pelvis, just depending on what your goal is. You can bring the block under the sacrum and make this entirely passive, which is quite nice. Again, using the axial skeleton to stabilize so that the appendicular, the legs in this case, can just fall away from the midline. Not too much though. We want to almost have more internal rotation in the legs so that the thighs can plug back into the pelvis. I personally love a dynamic wheel here because it creates an engagement. Remember, my diaphragm's going down when I breathe, but an interesting way to play with that is by taking my arms up as I inhale. So my arms are going up, I'm taking my rib cage up and away from the diaphragm as I inhale, which is drawing the diaphragm away from my arms. Put that into a bridge pose, and I can play with inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Feet are parallel, knees are about hip width apart, and I'm just tracking this line. To go even deeper, I try to create a 1-to-1 breath ratio. So a 4 count inhale and a 4 count exhale. And if I want, I can start to lengthen it. I'm using my diaphragm and my lungs as a pump for the fluid in my lower body. I'm also using gravity. I'm using the 2 skeletons against one another as a means of leveraging more space for the core of my body, trying to get the organs of reproduction and digestion and metabolization to play with this by stretching them internally as well. It can be helpful to think of the body as almost like a gymnasium. Be 5 years old when you have these precious, delicate moments to practice, because whether it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whether it's 1 hour or 3 hours, this is your home, and you must nourish it. You must take care of its foundation and make sure that the relationship to gravity is sturdy so that you can house and build and generate the sorts of things that you care to spend your time on, because this is your vehicle. This is your mechanism for creating all of those changes in the world that you'd like to see. And what is it you care about? What you care about, those emotionals, are going to generate the thoughts that you give more attention to. Those thoughts ultimately beget action, where you're applying yourself in the world. And that, my friends, is why knowing a bit more about your body, understanding some of the principles and the ways of finding the most efficient means possible for the body to express itself. If this central axis of the spine is free from limitation or structural impediment, that is going to have profound influences on the body. And not just the body, but on our emotional state, on our mental state, on our physical state. We're going to have greater ease, greater comfort, greater dynamic engagement with the world around us from being more aligned. And again, one of the most profound places that we can assess this is in Tadasana. This simple posture of standing, how someone is doing that will have echoes in their life. And so cultivating presence in this posture, rather than being forward on our toes in the future, rather than being on our heels and resistant to the future by dwelling upon the past, if we can find those 4 corners of our feet, our neutrality in this moment, and a free place for the diaphragm to move, all sorts of things are going to bloom for you and for the people around you. So I hope that you've found this useful and that it finds you well and kind to yourself, and exploring and expanding upon the things that you're curious about, because knowledge is a part of that key. We need to care about the things that we care about, and whatever that is, again, there's no dogma. However you choose to engage with the world around you, give it purchase, give it power. And we do that by learning more about something and then taking action and applying ourselves. So it's a pleasure to share this information with you. I hope that it's been of some use to you, and I'm here for sharing and cultivating a deeper experience of being at home in the body. So may this find you well, may it find your people well, and I look forward to being here in some capacity for you in the future. Many blessings. Be safe. Take care.